could even get out the door, etc. And then we had our first meeting, just 12 people in the neighborhood on December 1st. This is our 11th event, and we have 200 plus people. And we're not unique. This is happening in the entire country. Every night, living rooms, and so, we're in touch with 15 to 20 other groups. Many of you are here. We've promoted this through Fairfax Democrats, etc. We've had candidates come speak. We've had our delegate, Rip Sullivan, in the area. We have training coming up in 2 weeks for advocacy. We have campaign speakers like Mike Henry next Thursday, who's Chief of Staff for Tim Kaine. We've done phone banking. We've done signature collecting for Justin Fairfax, running for Lieutenant Governor, as well as meet and greet with him. We have a lot going on with that, and I'll send out a note afterwards if anyone is interested in joining our group, because we have a lot planned. If you're in your own groups, we would love to talk to you too about sharing, ideas, etc. So I'm going to but thank you so much for everyone for coming, and I'm going to hand it over to Nadia to just introduce her own. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, so thank you. Welcome to my home. I'm really happy to have you all here. I've known Ralph over the years. I've seen him at so many Democratic events. I'm the treasurer for the Fairfax County Democrats, so I go to Democratic events, and everywhere I've gone, I've seen what a wonderful person he is and how everybody really enjoys talking to him. And I decided that we have all these new people who have never had a chance to meet Ralph. That's why I decided I wanted to do a meet and greet at this time when he's able to come and do meet and greets. And I hope that all of you will come out and vote on June 13th. That's So please come out and vote for Ralph on June 13th. And Ralph, I would like to let you have a chance to talk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Good afternoon. What a great crowd. Nadia, thank you so much for opening your home. We couldn't do events like this and have gatherings like this if not for the kindness and graciousness of people like Nadia. So let's give her a big hand. It is nice being back in friendly territory, as we say. We just finished our session this morning. We've wrapped up the budget, and you've heard the saying, swimming with sharks. There are a lot of sharks out there, and so it's great to be back with our friends. And it is just so wonderful and amazing to see the amount of people that are coming to events like this. And, I think we have to ask ourselves why. I certainly ask myself why. And my answer is that a campaign that we experienced and witnessed in 2016 that was really based on hatred, it was based on bigotry, based on discrimination, based on a lot of misinformation and fear. And I think what we're seeing, I know what we're seeing, are people just like that are gathered in this room that say, no, this is not the country that I signed up for. It's not the Commonwealth of Virginia that I signed up for. We're not going to take it anymore. We're going to rise up, and we're going to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore. And the way to do that is to transfer this energy that we have in rooms like this to the polls on Election Day, because I remind people that I try to sit down and reason. I use science. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my background for those of you that don't know me. But I try to educate people and say, this is why we need to do such and such. This is why we need to vote this particular way on a piece of legislation. And whether it is for women's reproductive rights, whether it's for equality, marriage equality across Virginia, whether it's for education, health care, transportation, despite sitting down with these individuals, you can't change their minds. And so if we can't change people's minds, we need to change their seats. Okay? So that's why it's so important to have folks like you here. Now, I want to just give you a quick little background about myself. As you may be able to tell, those that you don't know me, I'm not from Northern Virginia. So I grew up on the Eastern Shore, on a farm. I'm a product of public education. The Eastern Shore, by the way, if anybody doesn't know where this, if you've heard of Chincoteague, where Misty, the wild ponies, but if you look on maps of Virginia, as a matter of fact, my friend Chap Peterson, when he ran for statewide, he had a map that left the Eastern Shore alone. We get very defensive. So I continue to kid Chap about that. But I left the Eastern Shore and went to Virginia Military Institute. I was a biology major there. When I graduated, I took a commission in the United States Army. I went to medical school at Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia. I then went and did my pediatric training at Fort Sam Houston down in San Antonio, which is where I met my wife Pam of 30 years. We have 2 children. Wes is 28. He went to William & Mary and then to Eastern Virginia Medical School, and now he's a neurosurgeon down in Chapel Hill. We are trying to get him back to Virginia. We don't like what's happening.
We don't like
it. Our daughter Aubrey is 25. She went to University of Virginia, and yeah, we have some wahoos in here. She's a graphics design artist, and so what Pam and I say about our children is they're both employed, so that's a good thing. And then I left San Antonio, went to Walter Reed Army Medical Center, then did my chief residency at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and just as soon as I finished there, the balloon, as we say, went up for Desert Storm. I served during Desert Storm. I took care of wounded soldiers. And then Pam and I came back to Norfolk in 1992. And so I have been a pediatric neurologist in Norfolk since that time. I also am the medical director of Edmark Hospice. I oversee the care of about 70 terminally ill children. And I will tell you that people ask me sometimes, say, Ralph, you're laid back. Can you do this? I have seen some things in my life, and I will tell you that there is nothing more difficult than the loss of a child. And so if there's anything that I have done in my life that has put my life in perspective, it is doing the hospice work for pediatrics. So then people say, excuse me, Ralph, why would a pediatric neurologist get into politics? And I want to tell you a couple stories, and these are fairly recent, and I think it will kind of tell you the story of why I do what I do, why I get up in the morning and try to help people, and why I've tried to do it at a level higher than just seeing patients in my office. But the first one, I want to tell you about Sarah. Sarah's 17. And I started seeing her when she was about 12, and I took care of her for seizures. And I have had her on several different medications, but as you all might know, and if some of you have a medical background, some of these medicines that we use are not good for a fetus. So we sit down and counsel people like Sarah that you really need to do everything you can to not become pregnant. And so how does that happen? I mean, how do we make sure that people have access to women's reproductive health care? We do it through education, and we do it by making sure that they have coverage. Well, Sarah called me and said, Dr. Northam, I need to talk to you. And I've had this conversation many times. And I said, come on in, Sarah, we'll sit down and visit. And she came in and she said, Dr. Northam, I know you've told me a lot of things over the years, but I'm pregnant. And I don't know what to do. And I need to talk about the options. And so I have had those discussions. I have helped young women make a decision that is very, very difficult in many situations. And so the point I want to make to you all today is that that is a decision that needs to be made between the woman and her partner and her provider. There is no excuse that a group of legislators, most of whom are men, by the way, should be telling women what they should and shouldn't be doing with their bodies. So if anybody knows my history, I was the one that stood up on the floor of the Senate and fought against the infamous transvaginal ultrasound bill. We were able to get at least part of it defeated, but that is why we need to change these seats. It was actually a woman on the other side of the aisle that introduced the transvaginal ultrasound bill and told the floor of the Senate and the world that that was a non-invasive procedure. I said, really? So that's one thing. Let me tell you about another patient. Katie, one of my favorite people. I started seeing Katie when she was 2. Again, procedures. I saw her up until she was 22 years old. You know, when you see the list of patients each day, you see certain people on the list and say, well, I love this girl. I'm really looking forward to seeing her. Well, she grew up, a beautiful young lady. She got married, had a 5-month-old child. Her husband had issues with anger management. He went out one night with his neighbors, friends. She texted him to come home. He came home. They had some words. He pulled out a revolver and shot her dead in front of her 5-month-old child. Her mother called me. It was one of the most difficult calls that I have ever taken. So it's things like that that make me get up in the morning and say, we need to fight for responsible gun ownership. We don't need individuals with anger management problems. We don't need individuals with mental illness. We don't need 2- and 3-year-old toddlers picking up loaded firearms on a bedside table. It's time for us to stand up and say, we're going to do something and change this so that we can make not only Virginia, but this country better. And so I would make the point to you again, we have been playing defense for far too long. We need to start playing offense.
That's right.
Okay? We have been reactive for too long. We need to start being proactive. So I would ask all of you to help me do this. And what we work on so hard in the Commonwealth of Virginia is economic development and all these things that I'm talking about. Being inclusive, welcoming people to the Commonwealth. Our doors need to be open. Our lights need to be on. That's the way we move our economy forward. We can't discriminate against women. We can't discriminate against immigrants. We can't discriminate against people because of the color of their skin or the religion that they practice or the country that they come from. So it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we have an inclusive Virginia. And I want to just end on one thing, and I'll be brief, and then I'll be glad to listen. Doctors, you know, we like to listen and hear what's on folks' minds. But I want to just tell you very quickly about where we are with health care in the Commonwealth of Virginia and why we need people that understand health care at the table to make sure that all Virginians have access to affordable and quality health care. I was the second person back in 2008. I was second behind Tim Kaine as an elected official to endorse Barack Obama. And one of the things that Barack Obama promised us is that all Americans would have access to health care. And you know what? He kept his promise. And I will sit here and stand here, rather, this afternoon and tell you as a doctor, as a provider, there are some very, very good things about the Affordable Care Act. Let's start with no more pre-existing conditions. Okay? It wasn't that long ago, and people's memories are not that good sometimes, but you know, it wasn't that long ago that if you had a condition, let's say like type 2 diabetes, and you left one place of employment to another, the insurance company said, no, Ralph, we're not interested. We know you have diabetes. Well, we don't have to worry about that anymore because of the Affordable Care Act. What about being able to keep our children on our policy until they're 26? Pam and I did that for both of our children, Wes and Aubrey. What a great way to get started for young folks. What about access to mental health care that's part of the Affordable Care Act? What about access to women's reproductive health care that's part of the Affordable Care Act? What about access to preventive care? All these things are so important. So now we have these clowns, and I know we have some folks from Washington here, so no offense, but we have these clowns in Washington who say that they're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act with absolutely no plan to replace it. In Virginia, there are 400,000 Virginians who now have access to health care that didn't have it before the Affordable Care Act. So it's kind of like, I use the analogy sometimes, it's like kind of like me going out here and jumping off a cliff and realizing once I get off the cliff, now what am I going to do? That's the same predicament we're in Washington. They have no clue how to make sure that Americans have access to affordable and quality health care. So I will end on this. A lot of people say, Ralph, why are you doing this? You're too nice. You're too laid back. But I want to remind you all that I fought for our country during Desert Storm. I've seen some things that a lot of people should never see. I have fought all of my life for our children to make sure that they're healthy, to make sure that they have access to a world-class education system. I have fought on the floor of the Senate for women's reproductive health care to make sure that we don't discriminate against the LGBT community. I have fought for education, and I have fought as lieutenant governor to move Virginia forward. So I've got plenty of fight in me. I've got plenty of fight left. I have put my medical practice on hold as of 2 months ago. I will be campaigning around the Commonwealth. A lot of this campaign is going to be grassroots. It's going to be being with people just like you today, listening, hearing what's on your mind, and again, making sure that we reach out to folks across the Commonwealth of Virginia and let them know the good things that we as Democrats have been doing. And I don't know about you, but I'm proud to be a Democrat, and when we elect Democrats, good things happen in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it's a fight. It's a fight that we all need to work on this together. No individual can do this by themselves. It's going to take all of us, and it means getting out and knocking on doors and making phone calls and talking to our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, and telling them that, yes, these elections have tremendous, tremendous consequences. And Virginia, we have fought too long and too hard for the principles and values that we believe in. We can't go back. We can't look like our friends down in North Carolina. We can't discriminate against the LGBT. They have lost the NCAA tournament. They have lost the NBA All-Star game. They have lost multiple business. Millions and millions of dollars have left the state of North Carolina because of their most discriminatory pieces of legislation that we've ever seen. Virginia's not going to go back. We're going to be inclusive. We're going to have our doors open, our lights on, and we're going to say, we welcome you to the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I need your help. I look forward to working with you. We're going to be successful in June, and then we're going to take it on and take it, as we say, to the House on November the 7th. So I appreciate you all being here, and I look forward to working with you. I'll be glad to take some questions. Yes, ma'am.
So, Lieutenant Governor, I just want to thank you for coming here today to speak with us. I've been most concerned with education in our state, and one of the things that I've noticed is that over the past, decades, we've been consistently underfunding our public schools, our community college programs, higher education in general. I saw that a couple days ago you came out with a plan called G3, Get Skilled, Get a Job, Give Back.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm very excited about it. I'd love to hear more thoughts about it. What was your perspective on it? What do you think we need to be doing to get it done?
Yes, let me just thank you so much for the question. And if I can leave my mark, and as you know, a governor has 4 years. We're the only state where you can't run for re-election, so we have to hit the ground running. So if I can leave my mark, it will be to make sure that all of our children have access to a world-class education system. My wife, Pam, is a teacher. She's a K-5 science teacher. We're both advocates for education, for the arts, for music, all of these things. But let me start at the top, because you mentioned a couple things. The first is we have some great colleges and universities in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We need to make sure that they're affordable for all Virginians, and so we're working very hard on that, and some of the G3 program that I'm going to get to in just a second is for that. We have 23 great community colleges, and we're really focused on bringing skills to jobs. The jobs of the 21st century are in what we call STEAM-related areas: science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. So it's very important that we train our workforce for the 21st century jobs, things like cybersecurity, unmanned aerial systems, biotechnology, personalized healthcare, data collection, data analysis. Those are where a lot of the jobs are. So how do we make sure that college, and especially community colleges, are affordable for everyone? So I introduced the G3 program, get skilled, get a job, and give back. And so anybody that wants to pursue higher education in Virginia, especially in high demand areas, can go through a mentor that will then help them find the path for what they want to do. And their 2 years of education for a certification will be free. And then part of the commitment from them is to give back public service, either through local or government, or through a small business. So anyway, that's kind of what the thinking is. And it just goes back to my roots. And I've worked hard, but I've had great opportunities. And so I was able to have all of my education paid for by the military. And I gave back to the military, and I gave back to our country, and there has been nothing more fulfilling. So I think it'll be a great program and plan as we move forward. A couple other things I just want to hit on regarding education. The SOL system, we have completely revised that. We need to stop teaching our children how to take multiple choice tests. They need to think creatively, so that's very important. And then, as far as this is, and I tell you, I don't want to keep you all too long, but my background is in early childhood development, and I can just tell you as a parent and as a pediatric neurologist, there is a tremendous learning potential before our children ever get to kindergarten. So that, you know, if one family has the means to send their children to pre-K and another doesn't, it really sets up the gap between the haves and the have-nots. So I have worked very hard with a lot of folks in Richmond to make sure that we allow all of our children access to pre-K education. And it's not, you know, it's not just about didactics. It's not just about learning numbers and letters, but it's about learning good, healthy lifestyle choices, staying away from cigarettes, drugs, good nutrition, all of these things. Children are so impressionable at a young age. So we just opened up 13,000 more slots this year for pre-K. So we're on our way. I tell people we planted some seeds in some very fertile ground, but we've got to continue to let them grow. And what I'd like to do is, you know, Terry's been a great leader, but I'd like to put some Miracle Grow on what he started and take Virginia to the next level. So anyway, that's kind of a summary of what we're doing with education. Yes, ma'am.
Like everyone else who watched the election returns, the biggest glaring thing to me was the gerrymandering of the state. And then PBS did a special on it, and they showed how it dies in committee so that there's never a public vote. And it's like, how can we affect change?
Beautiful question. Thank you. And I meant to mention that, and I failed to, but a couple things. First of all is voting rights.
Yeah.
Those of us in this room, and something that I have fought for since I was in the Senate for 6 years and then as Lieutenant Governor, is to make it less cumbersome. Make it easier for people to be part of the democratic process. Make it easier for them to vote. And we have all this wonderful technology. But every time we put in a piece of legislation, for example, no excuse absentee. If you all have ever voted absentee, you have to check a box of an excuse.
Where are you going to be?
Yeah. Well, let's just make it no excuse for people that want to be part of the process and vote and they can't come on election day. Let's make it easier. Well, that dies every year in the House, and it did again this year. As far as redistricting, probably the most important thing that we can do, and we have this coming up in 2021, is to focus on redistricting. Every year that I was in the Senate, I introduced legislation for nonpartisan redistricting. And I was actually part of that little documentary that you saw. So I was in that. Every year it passed in the Senate, and then it would go down to the House in some early morning subcommittee with no recorded votes, and they would defeat it. And they did the same thing again this year. So what we need to do, a couple things. I'm going to make a point from what you said.
That's okay, good.
This is our time to build our base, to build our party, and change the seats out there. And we have, right now, we have 17 delegate seats that are currently held by Republicans that Hillary won in 2016. We need to make sure that we have good people that we support running for all of these seats. And so if we can get our majority back in the House, if we can get our majority back in the Senate, that will be great. If we don't, and 2021 comes around, which is the next redistricting, and we lose the governor's office, Virginia will literally go back 10 plus years, and that's all about gerrymandering. And so the importance of having a Democratic governor is that that legislation will come to the governor's desk. If the governor doesn't like it, he'll say, no, this is not what we're interested in. And they're going to be incentivized to work with the governor if they're a Democrat, because if they don't, it's going to be turned over to the courts. And that's the last thing they want to happen, because they know the courts will do it fairly. So redistricting, as you get around and talk to your neighbors and friends, make sure they know how very, very important that is in this election in 2017. So thank you very much for the question.
It was good.
Thank you.
Good documentary.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. How do you differentiate yourself from Tom Perriello?
Yes.
Is that his name?
Yes.
Your opponent.
Well,
So why
you know,
should we vote for you and not for him?
what I would say, I am not here today to campaign against Tom Perriello. I think he's a good person. He served 2 years in the Congress. I think what you'll see as this campaign unfolds, I would like you to look at his record, his resume, look at my record, my resume, look at the things, the progressive values that I have fought for, things like women's reproductive health care, things like marriage equality, things like environmental issues. I have always been opposed to offshore drilling. I could talk to you about that if you're interested. So I think you'll see, and another thing, a common sense gun. And again, I'm not here to talk about his record. He has an A+ rating with the NRA. You don't get an A+ rating with the NRA unless you stand up for the values that that they found important. My grade is a D-. I'm proud of it. So I will continue to fight, as I always have, for common sense gun laws. So I think you'll see as this campaign unfolds. I'm out of session. I'm back on the campaign trail. A lot of grassroots efforts that we'll be doing, out talking to people in the field, and I think you'll get a good feel. And this primary is going to be good. It's going to allow the energy to continue, and it's going to allow people to look at our resumes and look at where we want to take Virginia. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So if, God forbid, and Donald Trump is still president when you take the governorship, what would you do to protect the state of Virginia? For instance, would you oppose deputizing, local police and state troopers and all that to enforce the ICE raids and so on? What can you do?
Well, I will give you a good example of what
Sir.
I can do. We just had a bill yesterday, a Republican bill that would form or be opposed to sanctuary cities in Virginia. We don't have any sanctuary cities in Virginia, but it's all just propaganda, and it came to a tie. And so the lieutenant governor, which is one of my jobs, I break ties. So I broke the tie
Wonderful.
in favor of the Democrats. So there are things like that to do. So I appreciate that. I tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to mingle, and please come up and let me know what your questions are. But again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Nadia, for opening up your wonderful home. And I look forward to working with all of you, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.